Hello, and welcome to the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Siri Vincent Plough, and I'm so glad you're here. This is the show where I explore heathenry through a queer lens. We will be talking about traditional witchcraft, runes, folklore, and so much more. Join us, won't you, as we journey to the ends of the 9 realms and back. Hello, and welcome back to the Heathen's Journey podcast. I have a big announcement. In my time away from the podcast, I have been working on something big. I wrote a book. I'm happy to announce that Queering the Runes, A Radical Approach to Healing on the Heathen Path will be released from Wiser Books in fall of 2024. I'm actually still finishing up my first draft. The deadline is coming up soon, but I just couldn't hold this in any longer. In this book, I talk about queer roots for rune work. I go through the Elder Futhark and relate all of the runes back to queer themes and dig into some rune magic. All of my writing for the book has obviously taken priority over the podcast, but working on the book has also given me ideas for the podcast, especially the episodes that are about the runes. There is so much to talk about with the runes that I can't put it all in the book, so I'm going to continue my rune series here, especially focusing on the Underworld journey. And on that note, let's get to today's rune, Eihwaz. This is the first rune of the tree runes in the Elder Futhark. The Norse people are very much tree people. In our creation myth, humans are made from trees. Ask and Embla, or Ash and Elm, are the ancestors of all of us. We have an affinity and love for trees that can be connected back to this original creation. Many trees are grounding. You can be grounding, but it can also be unsettling. The yew is a fascinating tree, both biologically and in folklore. Yews are ancient. There are living yew trees that are 500 to 1,000 years old. All parts of the yew tree are poisonous except for the flesh of the berry, but make sure you don't swallow the seeds. Poisonous plants have a special place in witchcraft. They are key ingredients in flying ointments, creating the perfect biological reaction to send you on a wild trip. Because of the toxic elements within this tree, it can be used ritually in very small quantities in a flying ointment, or it could be used as a poison. This knife's edge balance between Eihwaz is deeply related to death and transitions from the upper realms of Yggdrasil into hell and the underworld. And yet there are many paradoxes with this tree. The poison of the tree comes from alkaloids known as taxines, and yet it also produces taxanes that are used in medicine to fight cancer, particularly breast and lung cancer. Taxol is the most well-known naturally derived cancer drug and makes up an important part of chemotherapy. According to the National Cancer Institute, Taxol is used to treat cervical cancer, endometrial cancer, lung cancer, ovarian cancer, thymic carcinoma, and carcinoma of an unknown primary. The taxanes used to produce Taxol come from the bark of the Pacific yew. It is a very harsh medicine, but an essential one. Magically, you could say that the yew tree is the imperative that in order to heal, you need to be able to hex. In this way, the yew tree represents the full spectrum of life. It is able to move us through the different stages of life and death and rebirth all in one. This is essential for the world tree because it contains all of lived experience within its branches and roots. Some listeners may be confused at my referring to the world tree as a yew tree. It is often referred to as an ash tree in the Eddas. There is some debate because the yew tree was called needle ash in some parts of Scandinavia. Honestly, I think that the exact species of the world tree is liable to change in the psychic realm. Why would the world tree be any one specific tree when it bears every species? In her incredible Wild Soul Runes book, Lara Veleda Vesta poses questions for each of the runes. I turned to her book again as I was writing this episode and found this incredible list of questions. Sacred yew, what is your direction? How does above relate to below? How does below relate to above? Are you a tree? Are you a hook? What is the nature of the rooted? And what is the nature of the branch? What is the nature of death that is life? Where should I take a chance? Holy relic, how do I sacrifice? Ancient container, where is my offering? There are so many different directions to go, but the thing that I always think about when Eihwaz turns up is that second set of questions. How does above relate to below? How does below relate to above? Because this is the rune that has a hand in all the worlds. There is one hook in the upper realms, another hook in the lower realms, and the spine of the rune is the middle worlds, Midgard, Alfheim, Svartalfheim, Jotunheim. This mimics the way that yew trees grow. They have long networks of roots underneath the soil, and their gnarled branches grow down toward the ground. Often, the roots of the yew will peak above the ground quite far away from the trunk. The tree branches will reach toward the ground to touch them. The branches and roots hook, holding the earth and holding us together. This is even one way that the yew tree can reproduce. The branches grow toward the ground where they can take roots, separate, and become a fully new tree. Kari Tauring sees this as a beautiful metaphor for Urlag. We help one another through our transitions. Another important thing to note about the yew tree is that they have a gender binary of their own. There are male and female trees. There are other species of tree that contain all of the sexual characteristics in a single individual, but the yew is not one of them. That's particularly interesting because for the longest time, I associated my queerness with the yew tree because of its association with portals into other worlds. But now I see the yew as a particular ally for binary trans individuals. The yew represents the connection of life and death, as well as the liminal space between. Verdandi, Norn of becoming, lives in that hair's breadth between life and death. The yew is a hedge-riding tree. It is a tree that facilitates spirit journeying and communication with the dead. In the myths, there is a repeated motif of Odin riding the world tree. In fact, Yggdrasil is not the true name of the world tree. Rather, it translates to Yg's steed or Odin's steed. This is a reference not only to the travel between the worlds that the wandering god conducted, but it also refers to the myth of how Odin received the runes in the first place. To gain knowledge of the runes, Odin sacrificed himself to himself and hung for 9 days and 9 nights upon a tree. Many believe the tree to be the world tree, and because this was a time of shamanic journeying for Odin, the tree itself becomes a journey. Not only is this a tale of death and rebirth, but it also shows the tree as a threshold to wisdom. Much like the hanged man in tarot, Eihwaz gives us a sense of suspension. It takes time to learn the mysteries, time to learn how to listen, to carve, to sing, to read. And this is something the yew has in abundance. These long-lived giants of the tree family have the capacity to hold that much memory, that much wisdom. There is something cosmic here, something beautiful. Odin uses Sleipnir to ride between different parts of the tree. The 8-legged horse is ridden between the worlds, between branches and roots of the tree. Eihwaz and Eihwaz get connected in these moments, 2 runes coming together and then diverging. I'll be covering Eihwaz in the next season of the podcast, but for those of you who aren't familiar, Eihwaz is the horse, the steed, the ride. This rune looks like a capital M in the Roman alphabet. Marie Philhog writes in The Seed of Yggdrasil that you could conceive of the physical universe as a steed or traveling vehicle of what Odin really represents, spirit. In this way, we are all similar to Odin, as we are all spirits riding the world. Our bodies are our steed. It is through this riding that we are able to experience the world, and that is another way that we are in partnership with Yggdrasil. Odin is deeply associated with Yggdrasil for other reasons as well. In his face, as the hanged god, he hung from Yggdrasil's branches and journeyed through the spirit realm to find the runes. But we must not forget that Odin is also a god of war. He wandered the 9 realms to gain wisdom, yes, but one of his primary goals in the myths is to learn as much as he can to prepare for Ragnarok. One of the faces of Yggdrasil is as a yew tree, and that has its own warlike associations. The yew tree itself has long had associations with battle. Longbows were made out of yew wood because it is extremely strong but also flexible. In Grimnismal, Odin tells us that the god Ullr is located in Idalr, a grove of yews. Ullr is a god of the bow and snowshoes that we don't hear too much of in the myths. Longbow made new and different kinds of war possible for ancient peoples, covering so much more ground than they would have been able to cover previously with short bows. There is a sense of urgency building in this rune. When we think of a new weapon that can have great capacity to change the world, it does not usually bode well. This would have been a useful rune for Odin to have an understanding as if he was preparing for Ragnarok. And of course, because I'm recording this in the summer of 2023, here I see Eihwaz represented as Barbenheimer. Think about it, though. Barbie, the movie, if you've seen it, this isn't a big... It's in the previews, but it's all about going on a spiritual kind of journey to find yourself. So we have that aspect of Eihwaz in Barbie, but then in Oppenheimer, there is this potential to create something that destroys the world. So there you go. This is why you listen to this podcast, right? For the tenuous pop culture connections. Anyway, so the longbow wasn't only used in war, it was also used for successful hunting. When Eihwaz comes up along Algies in particular, there's a sense that the hunt is on, and depending on the situation, you could be the hunter or the hunted. A feeling of being hunted might be a problem for you when you are going through a particularly difficult shadow period. There are times in our lives when we are actually locked in battle with an adversary, a toxic friend or coworker, or, goddess forbid, a stalker. This could also signify a feeling of being watched or judged, which to me at least often feels like being hunted. When you are feeling this, Eihwaz is here not only as a warning, but as a source of protection. An old Germanic adage translates to, "Before the yews, no harmful magic can remain." In the Balkans, yew is still used as a protective amulet to keep away evil spirits. You can travel and carry simple yew twigs or make them into a cross or upside-down triangle. The positive side of Eihwaz as a hunting rune comes from the lessons we learn as hunters ourselves. The thing I'm talking about here can be a literal subsistence hunting, but it can also be a metaphorical hunt, as in the hunt for a new home, the hunt for a particularly treasured kind of clothing or unique collector's item, the hunt for knowledge or wisdom. That is a particularly Odinic interpretation of these two runes showing up together, the sly one always seeking wisdom and knowledge and stopping at nothing to get it. I also think this could signify that you are searching for your spiritual path moving forward. Eihwaz is therefore a good rune to work with for setting goals that are clear and manageable. It will help you plant firm roots that will allow you to move forward in a very good way. I'll be talking in more depth about Algies in 3 episodes or so. I would look for this combination as a reader only in readings for myself if I were going through some of those dark times, and I would suspect it would usually show up in a reading cast on a cloth, rather than a reading where specific runes are pulled. It all depends on their position, how they fall, and the question you asked or what you're going through. Because of this, the yew tree is often associated with cults of the dead. There are tales that when kings were sacrificed, they were poisoned with yew. Throughout the British Isles, churchyards were built around ancient yew trees. Some say that this is because pre-Christian people were already worshipping at the yew, so they placed the church there to lure more members of the congregation. It also makes sense to me that the early Christian missionaries would hear about the stories of death and rebirth on the yew and decide that this was an auspicious place for a church. Christianity is, after all, a death cult. Beneath these legends is the archetype of the yew as threshold. The yew has one foot in the world of the living and another foot in the world of the dead. Corinne writes of the yew tree that it looks twisted, like the roots are reaching above ground, prickly needles in a corkscrew shape as they reach toward the sky. The yew tree defies gravity, defies the boundary between what is a branch and what is a root. They have seen things that we can't imagine. They are an invitation to explore, a question, eldritch trees in the best sense. Like the yew, Eihwaz is an invitation. This is the perfect rune to use in trance work to meet the 9 realms. It has roots deep into the underworld and branches high into the heavens. The trunk is like a backbone, keeping things stable for the 9 realms. This rune can also act as a stabilizing force for us. Use it to ground your work and help push you into new heights. Yew is also an evergreen tree, which means it has associations with rebirth and standing up to adversity, but in a very particular way. Many people think of the winter solstice, Yuletide, and Christmas as winter celebrations of rebirth, but it was nonetheless considered bad luck to incorporate the yew into your garlands of evergreen at the time. The transformation of yew is specifically a transmutation into the underworlds and realms of death, which were being actively warded away during these celebrations. At a different point in the year, the yew tree was used for cleansing and purification. According to Kari Tauring, 9 kinds of wood were gathered and burned on the last night of spring to cleanse and purge. The yew would have been pruned at the solstice and then burned at Beltane. This is another rite of transformation that Eihwaz has been historically engaged in, the turning of the season from spring to summer into the fiery passion of the year. Yew is one of the sacred trees that helps us be reborn into our summer selves. When yew comes up in a reading, it is a sign that you have a connection between the living world, or Midgard, and the other realms of Yggdrasil. This is the rune that will give you the go-ahead to explore things like astral travel, journeying between worlds, and reaching out to speak with spirits. Please do be careful, though, because yew is so extremely toxic. Don't use it in anything that you would ingest, or I would even deeply caution you before using it in some kind of flying ointment, unless you have training in that way. I think there's also something really important in the message of Eihwaz that we always have this capability. When we map the 9 realms onto our bodies, we know that we are always connected to all of them. When we realize that we have different soul parts and that our soul parts can be in different multiple realms, Eihwaz is our guide. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm so honored to share these practices, conversations, and thoughts with you. If you would like to support this podcast directly, please consider supporting it on Patreon. I share episodes without the ads, and I also share announcements of upcoming work. I have only one tier at $3 a month, but you can give whatever works best for you. If you would like more of my writing on Nordic folk magic, consider subscribing to my newsletter Trollbrev. The name means magic letters, and it is a space for me to share some of my weirder and developing thoughts on magic. Links for both Patreon and the newsletter are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, keep it weird.